Hi, everybody. Welcome to the third installment of Kedma Conversations. We're so excited to have Jerusalem's Deputy Mayor, Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, with us tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to JICI, JICNY for co-sponsoring the series with us. At Kedma, we believe in the power of volunteering and in the importance of creating a community based on the joy of giving. To that end, we run international volunteer programs, as well as provide remote volunteer options in response to the coronavirus pandemic. And more to the point of tonight's conversation, we placed 200 gap year students in weekly volunteer positions in Jerusalem. Kedma students volunteer with Lone Soldiers and Lone Bnot Sherut. They help beautify the city by working in Jerusalem's municipal gardens. They work in women's shelters and at Moadoniot, which are after-school programs for kids from at-risk homes. These are only some of the places where our students volunteer. We believe in the power of volunteering and in its importance because it is the best way to get to know and connect with Israeli society. And what better place to get to know Israeli society than in Jerusalem? It is now my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Mori Kalman, founder and chairman of Kedma, to introduce tonight's guest.
Thank you very much, Orit, our wonderful director. Again, just to echo what Orit said, I want to thank JIC Israel for co-sponsoring it. It's a wonderful organization that we're partnering not just on this, but in general. So yeah, it's really a pleasure to introduce our evening's guest. For those of you watching on Zoom or on Facebook, Fleur is, that's the way you pronounce it, not Fleur, like a lot of people, like I thought also. So Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, as here, is really an extraordinary woman. Comes from Gibraltar, comes from a really wonderful family, as we're going to hear, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Grew up in Gibraltar, did her law studies in London at Middle Temple, I believe, which her father also went to, which is an exclusive training ground for barristers. One of four inns.
There we are. It's
that you can train at. She is, after practicing law, she moved to Israel, became an Olah, and worked not only running Tikva, which is a wonderful organization working with Ukrainian Jews, I think, or Russian Jews in Odessa. She spent many years consulting as well, consulting on various business issues. And then the last few years, she's been a member of the Jerusalem City Council, most recently for the last couple of years as a deputy mayor of Jerusalem. And we're going to talk about that, obviously, also the complexities. And the last few months, she's also been in the news because she's taken a leadership role in the United Arab Emirates. She has founded basically two different forums for women and for business in the UAE, which we'll speak about as well. So without any further ado, I wanted to begin our discussion, our conversation with our very honorable guest, the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Fleur Hassan-Nahoum. So my first question is—
Wonderful being here.
Thank you very much. Again, our first question is, as I mentioned, you grew up in really an extraordinary home. Your father was the chief minister of Gibraltar, was, from what I know, was really one of the pivotal figures, if not the pivotal figure in Gibraltar in the last number of years, last 50, 60 years. He was tremendously involved in civil rights and giving rights to Gibraltar. So I wanted to ask you on a personal level what it was like. Again, he was the chief minister. That's the name in Gibraltar, I believe, for basically the prime minister. He was the leader of the government. What was it like as a strong Jewish family to grow up in such a political home, as a Jew, as a proud and traditional Jew for you and your family in general? If you can just speak a little bit about growing up in that sort of family and that sort of background.
Well, I only have the background that I have, so I can't really compare it to anything else. But growing up, when I was born, he was already the chief minister of Gibraltar. So I don't know anything else really. Very busy, I guess. Every evening my parents were out, except Friday night, every single evening. They had events and functions. But every day my father made it a point to come home for lunch. Gibraltar is a small Mediterranean place, so the culture there is that people have lunch at home because that's the main meal of the day. And my father always made it a point to eat with us every day. When I think about me and my own children, and you know, how basically it's Shabbat maybe, and we're lucky another few times a week. It's quite amazing to be born into a family like that makes it a point to put family high up on your priority list. My father was a very down-to-earth person. He had no airs and graces. He refused to have Did you lose me? Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Oh, okay.
We see.
So my father didn't have any airs and graces. He refused a government. He refused like a residence for the chief minister, and refused any kind of trappings of power. And so we were raised at home, regular home. You know, apart from the fact there was a bodyguard in the door, there was really nothing very different about it. My mom drove us to school, you know. So on the one hand, Gibraltar's the life in Gibraltar is kind of very ordinary and very regular, lovely family way to grow up. On the other hand, everybody knew who I was. Everybody knows who my father was, so everybody knew who I was. And so there's always that thing that accompanies you, that you have to show a good example, that other kids can do stuff, but not you, because people will always point and say, oh, well, look at, you know, who her father is. And so you have that kind of added, even as a very small child, you have that added layer of responsibility and accountability that other children don't have. And so I guess that was different, but I think that just made me a more mature kid. I didn't resent it at all. I had a wonderful, wonderful father, and he was, for me, first and foremost, my dad. And of course, then he was the chief minister of Gibraltar. But yeah, there were bad moments, there were good moments. I think the reason I'm in politics is because I had a lot of good moments also. The good moments is seeing my father help people, change people's lives for the better, and move his society and his country forward in the way that he did. And that satisfaction, that kind of that sense of duty for public service is obviously what stayed with me and what pushed me into, motivated me into going into politics.
Did being a Jew put any more pressure on you, do you think, or within your family? Was there a sense that, you know, we have an extra important reason to always maintain that high standard that you talked about? Was there, I mean, was there any sense of anti-Semitism ever in growing up, or a whiff of that within Gibraltar? Or?
So look, there's always some anti-Semitism everywhere, but Gibraltar really is an example of an amazing place where, look, if there was anti-Semitism, my father was a very proud Jew who went to shul every week, and he was elected 8 times by a Catholic majority country. So obviously that did not affect anything, and I don't take that for granted at all, the way that I live there. Muslims were his biggest fans, they loved him. And so I grew up in a truly coexistence-oriented society, which that type of spirit is what I try and put into my work in Jerusalem, which is such a diverse society also every day.
Okay, so now we're going to jump ahead a little bit. Again, you practiced law, went to school in London, you come to Israel, I believe in 2001, is that correct?
That's right, it's going to be, next month is going to be 20 years.
20 years, that's right. So how did you, as an Ola, that's new in Israel, how did you get, even though you grew up obviously with the political aspect that you discussed, it was within you, but how did you go from an Ola, from Gibraltar, London, to become the deputy mayor? If you can just trace that journey for us.
As somebody would have told me that, that when I landed in Israel, when I didn't speak a word of Hebrew, that someday I was going to be, you know, have a public role where I had to make speeches in Hebrew, I would have said, no, you're kidding. So even though it was always, you know, with me, I didn't see it happening when I moved to this country, to find my way in this country, raise kids and learn Hebrew all at the same time. So how did it happen? I guess, you know, I'm a person of faith, so I believe that God opens doors for you. And I think that my personality, if there's a door open to me, I'll walk through it. And if somebody closes the door, I'll jump through the window. So that was always my personality anyway. I worked in nonprofit for many, many years at the JDC, which is an American, as you know, Jewish organization. And then I worked at Tikva, children's homes. So I kind of knew very well, I kind of knew the map of the gaps in society. After I was done with nonprofit, I just needed a change. I decided to become a consultant in communications and help businesses and organizations message in the right way and train people how to speak in the right way in terms of messaging and clear pitch, etc. So I set up my own business, and it was as part of my business that I was asked to help a small political party in the city that was having issues with their messaging. Their messaging was not clear, and they needed somebody to kind of help them with their campaign. And that was kind of, that was my first experience in dealing with politicians in Israel. And I kind of loved the idea of local politics. And I really, like most people, I think, people don't think about local politics. Most people don't. You think about national politics. And you think that national politics is what really influences your life. But the truth is that local politics is what determines what your spaces, outdoor spaces look like, your public spaces, how your transport looks like, education for your children, whether your street is clean or isn't, whether there's green around you. And so I like the idea of helping people on a day-to-day with day-to-day problems. I guess when I think back in Gibraltar, you know, it's a combination of state matters and day-to-day. This is such a small place. So my father, as the chief minister, was also the mayor in that sense. He actually took care of everything. And so I kind of like the idea of going back to that and helping people from the ground up. And so after helping this small political party a number of meetings, they said to me, listen, we're looking for a woman. They're always looking for a woman. We're looking for a woman for one of our slots. Would you consider it? And at that point, I was kind of like trying to convince myself not to do it, because I knew this is something that you know, because I grew up in it. I know the sacrifices. I know how hard it is. I know how people treat you when you're in the public space. Like, you know, they have a right to insult you and it's okay. And I knew all that going in. So for me, it's not a surprise. And so for me, it was like, do I do it knowing all that? And something just pulled me. And of course I had to go for it. And I've been on that train since then. The following election, I ran as the number two, as the deputy of Zev Elkin, who's used to be a Likud minister. Now he's gone to the dark side to Gideon Sa'ar, just joking. And he again looking for a liberal woman to balance him out, and I was the head of a party at that point. I'd become leader of the party that I was in, and so I ran with him, and he lost. But there were 2 rounds of voting, and in the second round, I picked the right horse. My friend Moshe Leon, who's the mayor of Jerusalem. He's a great guy, and I knew he was going to make a great mayor. I just, you know, I ran with Elkin because that was, I liked Elkin's vision for the city, and he gave me a really fantastic spot. But when Elkin lost, I had a choice of 2 people, and I went for the person that my gut told me to go for, and he won. So there's a lot of luck also involved in politics. You have to somehow believe that God puts you where you need to be.
And as we know, all politics are local, as you said. So, but I want to ask you, Golda Meir notwithstanding, some recent women leaders notwithstanding, Israel is known as a more male-dominated society, especially in politics. What challenges have you faced as a woman, especially as an observant woman? You know, we'll get a little bit more. I want to speak a little bit more about the complexities of Jerusalem in general with the different populations, but just without getting into specifics, Haredim, Arabs, but just in general, if you can address a little bit some of those challenges and how you've dealt with them and how you overcome to become such a successful politician.
Well, I'm not sure how successful, but whatever. I'm here. Well, listen, on the one hand, I don't like answering the question, how do you feel as a woman? I'm a politician. And I don't think for me, it's been a disadvantage being a woman. There are certain moments where it's an advantage to be a woman because women have excellent emotional intelligence and we really know how to calm people down and bring people together. So I see a woman, being a woman, as being an advantage in politics. It's just that politics hasn't caught up to that yet, but we're way ahead of the curve. We're way ahead of the curve in peace building. We're way ahead of the curve in mediation skills, in reading a room, in networking, all the things that are really crucial to being a politician. Now, where is it a disadvantage? And I like to make lemons into lemonade. I'm a positive person and I'm an optimist. And I think that a person who's not optimistic should not be involved in politics because then you have nothing to offer. So the main disadvantage, but for me it's an advantage, is the fact that people always underestimate women politicians. Always underestimated. You're seen as, oh, you're the token, or, oh, well, nice girl, but who does she think she is? Or nice girl, but how far can she go? And that is constantly there, constantly there. But I turn it into an advantage because they don't see you coming when they don't expect you. And so when they don't see you coming, you have that advantage that you're kind of camouflaged until you strike. And so like I said, and for me, for my own motivation, there's nothing that gets me going more than when somebody says she can't do something, because then I'm 100 times more motivated to do it. And so, like I said, the downside is the underestimation, the constant kind of cheapening of your position. But the upside for me is, like I said, the power of advantage and the motivation it gives me to succeed because I'm a woman, because women leadership is the next level of leadership, of good leadership, of kind leadership, of they call it service leadership or servant leaders. I believe in all that. I believe in that. That's why we're here. We're elected by the public to serve them, not to serve ourselves. And so I think women are always much more inclined to give themselves to a higher cause. And so that's why I feel that ultimately it's an advantage.
Okay, now to go into some of those complexities, as a deputy mayor, we know Jerusalem is probably, I think, the most complex city in the world in terms of just the diversity that we deal with, the religious, non-religious, Arab, and all across the spectrum we've got. And as a central city, the holy to three religions, everything all together. So if you can speak a little bit about what you've seen in terms of things could look depressing, on the one hand, that without getting into specifics, unless you want to go more into, we've known what's been going on with Corona and different populations not necessarily doing what they should do, and that's caused a lot of dissension within Israel, and just the day-to-day life, Arabs, Jews, Palestinians, etc. If you can speak a little bit about how you navigate those complexities, what vision do you see for Jerusalem in the next few years? Is there a way for more cooperation between the different aspects? And I know every, Moshe Leon's spoken about being more involved with the Arab population, etc. So if you can address that complexity and the day-to-day life.
Sure. Like you said, Maury, Jerusalem is really probably the most complex city in the world. We are a city of 25% ultra-Orthodox, Haredim, 40% almost Arabs. And these two populations have got a lot of challenges on the socioeconomic level, ultimately because of educational reasons. The Arabs don't get taught Hebrew, the Haredim don't get taught, the Haredi men don't get taught co-curriculum subjects. And this means that the workforce participation amongst these two populations is low. The Arabs mainly because of the women and the Haredim mainly because of the men. That makes us the poorest city in the country. So that's kind of the socioeconomic map. Not to mention the fact that because we are also the largest Haredi city in the country and the largest Arab city in the country at the same time, we have kind of the tensions. And on a day-to-day, I've got to tell you, there's more tension between Jews with Jews than there is between Jews and Arabs. And the tensions are mainly around the ultra-Orthodox and the secular population. Now, there's a big chunk of the city who are like me, modern Orthodox people. We're 23% of the city, 22% of the city also secular, completely secular. But the problem is that the Haredim, even though they're still a minority in the city, they are almost a majority in City Hall because they vote in double the numbers that the rest of us vote. So even though Israel has got a very, very high voter participation rate for national elections in the 70%, which is unheard of. America is way, way lower than that. But we have a very high voter participation rate. But in local city, 32, 33, 34%. Haredim are soldiers of God. Their rabbi tells them to go out. They don't even know who they're voting for. They have the strategic bloc strategy, which really works for them. And so in the end, they're 50%, 52% of the city council, which is very challenging for us to be able to pass any budgets or any policy that finds place for the different populations in the city, such as all sorts of different streams of Judaism, which they, oppose, LGBT community, anything which is not them or anything they could approve of. And so, it takes a lot of kind of political gymnastics to get things through. We manage, but it's really very difficult. And so these are part of the complexities. Part of the complexities are the fact that the city council itself does not proportionally represent the people. So there's no Arab representatives through no fault of our own, through their fault, they don't vote. Not because they can't vote, because they choose not to vote. Now, I understand also their political pressures. Hamas threatens them and Fatah threatens them. It's horrible. I do understand that, but this not voting causes the Haredim to have more power and them to have no power at all. So I'm a pluralist. I believe that everybody has their place in the city. In fact, I believe the DNA of Jerusalem is one of diversity. King David picked this plot of land here because it never belonged to any one tribe. The tribes were Judah, Benjamin, were nearby, but they weren't in Jerusalem. And so this city, since the beginning of time, since the beginning of its establishment 3,000 years ago by King David, was a city which represented all the tribes. And so I work very hard so that those tribes are still represented today. And so, and again, I'm a religious woman. It's a balancing act, but I don't want the secular to leave my city. What's going to become of the city if it becomes a city of Arabs and ultra-Orthodox Jews? If Jerusalem is as important to the state of Israel as it is to the Jewish people. And so if anybody around the world, any Jew around the world, does see themselves in Jerusalem, we have a problem. Jerusalem has alienated itself from its people. And so one of the things that I do, and I'm not, I don't have a lot of support in the council, but I do have a lot of support through my constituency, is to ensure that Jerusalem remains a diverse city that embraces all its people, all the tribes of the Jews, but also its Arab residents. Ultimately, this is what gives the flavor of Jerusalem. And I believe that what we need to do really is develop East Jerusalem so that the east part of the city becomes a productive part of our economy and not, an area that is full of hatred and aggression towards us. It's not our fault, but it's our job, along with local partners that do exist over there, to create a better society. I believe in a shared society. I say this as a woman who's a Likud Central Committee member. I believe in a shared society. And I believe that Jerusalem, Mitzion Titzeh Torah, from Zion, we will have Torah. The Torah is also the methodology for a shared society. We are not just the capital city of the state of Israel, the Jewish people. We're also the home of the best social innovation in the world. And so if we don't crack that code for a shared society with Jews and Arabs and everybody else, then who will? It's from Zion that Torah will come out. And that's why I'm so invested and engaged in the work that we're doing in our city.
So just to follow up on that, I know there's been talk about creating a Silicon Wadi in East Jerusalem. You mentioned that there are local partners. Can you speak a little bit more about that in terms of, I know in the last election, I believe there was one Arab who was going to run, but then I think
he did.
Right.
No, there were two Arabs who ran. One of them is my dear friend, Ramadan Davash. The other guy, turned out he wasn't a resident of the city, so he did it more for the PR element. And so he was booted out, but Ramadan Dawash actually ran, and unfortunately he didn't have enough Arabs voting for him. The irony is that if Arabs did vote, he could probably be mayor. That's the irony.
Is there behind the scenes work going on right now to cultivate a new generation of leaders that can also support Israel on a national level to do what we all want, which is to have a peace?
Look, this is what the Silicon Valley project is about. It's about, ultimately, bottom line, it's about quality employment for Arabs. And this is where my UAE work comes into it. Because I believe, my vision is that East Jerusalem could become the R&D hub of the entire Middle East, because the Arabs, the young Arabs graduating from the universities and colleges in this city have a bit of both. They have the kind of startup nation hunger, and they also have the Arab culture, and they have the language, of course. And so I believe that this combination, if we open up, build, create high-tech hubs in East Jerusalem, this could really be the future of this shared society that we envision here.
Okay, and if you can speak a little bit now, going to the Haredi society, I think in the last number of years, there has been, it seems like, more integration with the Haredi world, with the more general Israeli society, the different colleges that have been opening up. If you can speak a little bit whether the pandemic has, how that's affected that, and what you see a vision for the next few years also with integration with the Haredi world in Jerusalem.
It's very interesting. I think the whole society can feel it. The first lockdown, there was such an incredible sense of solidarity in Jerusalem between Jews and Arabs and all the denominations. I have to say, the volunteers that we had were from everywhere. They were helping everyone. I myself raised funds for food packages in the Arab and the Jewish community. Everybody was really, really invested in helping everybody. So the elderly of East Jerusalem were treated exactly the same way as the elderly in West Jerusalem. I'm not saying it's not that normally. I'm just saying that we got to see that like intensively. And actually, I gave a talk at the UN about this. That actually, the crisis and the pandemic actually pulled us together, and the infrastructure of volunteerism and the different nonprofit organizations that work together. The beauty is that they remain in place still till today and will do. So we created something that didn't exist, and it's taking us into hopefully normality very soon. Having said that, there's still a lot of work to do. We're talking about a population that lives very much under the poverty line, and so quality employment, I really believe that the philosophy of Jared Kushner and Trump was correct. You have to develop, I believe in peace through economic development. I believe that when people have a satisfying career, good salary, they can take their kids whenever they want to. I truly believe that human beings ultimately really want the same thing. And the ones that don't is because they've been brainwashed by corrupt leaders not to, like the ones in the West Bank and Gaza, unfortunately. These are people who are horribly, and their children are horribly brainwashed from the moment they're born. But the Arabs in East Jerusalem, I'm not going to say it's true of everybody, but certainly the partners I have in the work that we do are all very clear about two things. One is they don't want to live under the Palestinian Authority. They want the city to remain one, united under Israeli sovereignty. They can't say that out loud, but that's what they think. And two, that that they understand that we are now, and I'm not saying it was always like this, because I'm willing to put a mirror in front of my face. I'm not saying it was always like this, but they are certainly ready now to reach out to East Jerusalemites and say, how can we build a very advanced economy together? And that's something that I'm very, very invested in. I'm bringing hopefully big companies, investments from the UAE, investors to come and develop Silicon Valley. It's a fantastic project that's going to make money for a lot of people, including the Arab landowners, and jobs and hotels, and a really important project. And vis-a-vis a shared society, I also see East Jerusalem in another light. I think that all the battles that we have with the Haredim, with the ultra-Orthodox about Shabbat, for example, and where can you open a restaurant, and where should you open a bar, and why can't the cultural institutions be open? And this constant battle of laying the borders of this holy city and how holy should it be on Shabbat, I think East Jerusalem is a perfect solution, because if we develop a real tourism hub there, Israelis, secular, from around the country, tourists on Shabbat could experience the Arab hospitality. And so that would bring prosperity to East Jerusalem on a day that the rest of Jerusalem is shut down, basically. So I see this as, I think that if we just think about this rationally and from a business perspective, we should just be able to let go of this conflict and resentment and look forward to the future. And I think that the Abraham Accords has kind of reset the stage for this now and helps us kind of look forward in a different way. And even though the Arab, the Palestinian machinery is making a lot of noise, the PR machinery is making a lot of noise against it, the average Arab that I've spoken to from East Jerusalem are thrilled, because this is going to be eventually a way for them to also create prosperity in that part of the city. I want there to be hotels in East Jerusalem. I want there to be hotel owners who are, Jerusalem Arabs. That's fantastic. That would be my dream. And that brings prosperity to everybody. That brings quiet, that brings peace, and that brings a future that we can think about for the good of our children together.
As mentioned, you are very involved in the nascent relations with the United Arab Emirates. I don't know so much about Bahrain yet, but I know you've been to Dubai, you've been involved in conferences, and there's a women's group as well. If you can speak, can you tell us a little bit about, from the ground up, what that's been like, where you see those relations going? You mentioned as investing in Jerusalem. There was big news right away. There was investor. I don't know if they finalized it with Beitar Jerusalem, with the soccer club. I don't know if
apparently not.
Right. There was a big headline.
Well, no, it wasn't for reasons. It wasn't for the reasons that the press. I mean, the press spoke about all sorts of issues within Beitar Jerusalem about having an Arab club owner. That wasn't the case. The Israel Football Association did some due diligence on a guy, and apparently most of his money was in Venezuela. So anyway, that was that.
Just to follow up on that, also in terms of and if you can focus a little bit about the women. We know women in Arab societies not always at the
well, actually, Maury, you'd be surprised. I
want to hear.
That's one of the myths that was shattered for me as soon as I got to Dubai. Women are very powerful. Actually, it's a very matriarchal society, believe it or not. The mother rules. It's unbelievable. All the sons are like beholden to the mother. It's fantastic. I love it. And there's a lot of very powerful women. There's women ministers. There's 50% of the UAE Council are women. I have to remind you, 25% of the Israeli Knesset are women. So they're doing better than us. And women in top jobs, in banking, in business. So, and also in Bahrain women are very, very strong political leaders, business leaders. And so for me, first of all, there was no lack of strong women, strong pushy women like me and my Jewish sisters to create this council with. They're all thirsty for peace, for normalization, for a better future for our children. We've had lots of networking events. We've had in-person meetings. We're really growing, and we have some very high level people in it. The UAE-Israel Business Council is more of a business focus. Of course, my women's council is, we say business, culture, and friendship. So we've had a lot of cultural collaborations as well as business collaborations with the women. The regular UAE-Israel Business Council is, it's an incredible community of almost 4,000 people. 2,000 signed up to our website, where they tell us what they want, what type of business they're looking for. And we basically act as shidduch makers. We run events, we have newsletters, and we connect people. We've had a lot of very successful partnerships, successful deals being made that we brokered. And so it's all very exciting, because I believe that, like I said with East Jerusalem, when you do business with people, you create trust, you get to understand the culture, you basically build that bridge. And so that's why the UAE-Israel Business Council has been so pivotal. We really had first mover advantage. We were there first, and it's been so pivotal in building the infrastructure for a warm peace. I've been out there a few times. Hopefully, as soon as they open the airport, I'll be back.
Okay, we're going to take some questions. I'm just going to ask maybe one or two last questions, sort of connected questions, and then if we have any questions from the audience, you can send them in. So one question, sort of to sum up what we've been talking about right now: where do you see Jerusalem in 10 years from now, in terms of, there's a lot of construction, there's a whole new business center at the beginning of the city. Obviously the pandemic has destroyed tourism, which is one of your other hats that you're in charge of, I believe, the tourism portfolio in the Jerusalem municipality. So where do you see Jerusalem just on a practical level in 10 years from now? And then after, if you can answer, where do you see yourself in 10 years from now, politically and in general?
Okay, so Jerusalem, I'm very optimistic. I see basically a capital city with a fast transport system that connects us to the whole country, which means that everything is a 25, I mean, if it's going to be a 25-minute ride to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem will basically become the same city in the sense of as economic hubs. So I see a very advanced transport system. I see a developed East Jerusalem. I see much more technology, high-tech hubs here in the city. We're very strong on biotechnology and pharma. And so I see that developing very, very nicely. And this is something I'm also very involved in, I see a buzzing hub of embassies around the American embassy, which hopefully we're just passing the plans now, will be on Derech Hebron, which is the southern part of the city, a main thoroughfare. And so my vision is that behind that, it'll become a hotel and embassy district, and that, please God, inshallah, many more embassies will move. Just in the last few days, I'm facilitating the move of Czech Republic and Kosovo. Important because they are Central European countries, and they've said to the European Union, we're not with you, we're setting up our embassies in the capital of the state of Israel. Every sovereign country has a right to choose its own capital. And we have our capital, which has always been our capital for thousands of years. And so the Czech Republic and the Kosovo have told the EU exactly what they think, and we're very pleased about that.
Any other breaking news on that level in terms of there was a lot of talk, especially a few months ago. It's been a little quieter now, but are you, without giving the names, unless you want to tell us, we'll keep it quiet, any other countries that are in the process or that
well, Czech Republic and Kosovo. Look, there's been talk for a while about Brazil. Now that would be a huge embassy if it did move. Look, everybody's really busy with Corona right now. No, Jerusalem is not on anybody's priority list except our own and the Jews around the world and Christians as well. But hopefully, I believe there'll be many more Latin American countries. Because I speak Spanish, I'm thrilled that the second embassy that we welcome to the city, the Guatemala, and the third trade office, which is going to become an embassy very soon, Honduras. And I've got a feeling we're going to keep inviting in Spanish-speaking countries and hopefully many more countries from around the world very, very soon.
Okay, and what about Fleur, Hassan-Nahoum in the future? Where do you see yourself? Is Jerusalem where you want to focus, or are you looking beyond that as well?
Well, I'm in Jerusalem at the moment. I'm very happy to be where I am. I think that my strengths lie within the field of international relations for Israel, mainly because I belong to a number of cultures that are relevant, and I speak a few languages that are very relevant, and I know how to present Israel, I think, in a very favorable way. So I don't think that, but you never know. In politics, you need a lot of siyata dishmaya. You need a lot of divine intervention. It's a lot of it is luck and timing. But if God wants me to still stick around, at some point I do want to go into national politics and focus on foreign relations for the country.
Okay, I don't know if there are any questions from anybody. We really appreciate your.
I just want to say something. I see
Yes.
that I have a cousin on this call.
Yes, I
We
was.
never met. So hi.
Hi, Fleur. Fleur,
see
nice
you.
to see you. We have actually met once.
When somebody's
But
shriveled.
it's nice to speak to you, and you know, it's a source of great pride that I know that you're doing what you're doing. And greetings from Miami.
Well, good for you. Enjoy Miami. I've actually I've been invited to speak to Miami. So when I do, I'll be sure to let you know.
Well, I'm in New York most of the time, though I will be in Israel for Sukkot, I hope. But right now we are COVID refugees in Miami. So
well, it's not a bad place to be. Enjoy.
Not a bad place. Anyway, it was lovely to see you.
Thank you. You too, Isaac.
It's uncanny how much you look like your father, I have to say.
Really?
Oh my God.
My mother's the pretty one.
You got both.
Thank you, Isaac. It's such a diplomat. Okay, I got it. I take it as a compliment.
It's lovely to see you, and I hope I'll have a chance to chat with you in person sometime in the not too distant future. I would say it's also nice to see Maury and at least a picture of Jay, Maury was my chavruta in the Gush, and Jay and I were at YU together. So there's some very, very old relationships here.
In the Jewish world.
Hi, Jay, how are you?
It's like a little, chavruta that.
Muted. Sorry. Thank you. How are you?
Good.
Okay.
So
okay. Well, I'll let you go on. I have to run, but I just want to say hello and Maury, congrats on all the great work you're doing on this, and thank you so much for saying hello, and I'll see you soon.
Bye. Okay, Fleur, if you have, Isaac will be in touch. Fleur, if you have, there are a couple, one question or a couple of questions. If you have a couple of minutes more, we can indulge you. So the question is whether somebody wants to hear more about the entrance of Superbus to create competition with Egged, questions about the sewage by the Kota, a little more, obviously people living in Jerusalem.
Local politics, let it live.
Local politics, exactly. And then the question of public water fountains and public bathrooms, especially at big tourist sites, so that people aren't buying water bottles all the time, stickers on the plastic recycling containers. That was one of a very specific question talking about tourism and the environment in Jerusalem. If you want to answer that.
What was the first question? Sorry.
The question of Superbus, if you want to address.
Oh yes. So look, this is one of the reasons I'm in the Likud party, is that I believe in liberal economics. I believe in breaking monopolies. Israel was built on socialist values, which at the time, of course, had their place. We had to build the land. The kibbutz movement were very part and parcel of building the land. But today, where we're at, I think we should be breaking all monopolies. I think everything should be open to competition. And it's ridiculous that we live in the world that we live in, that we have 4 main distributors for food products in the country, and that we pay more for a milky than they do in Berlin. So I'm a liberal-minded politician in terms of, in most terms, but economic terms for sure. And I think it's about time. Egged had their chance. They didn't provide the service that they were paid to provide. And we should open everything to competition so that everybody does a better job for the public, because they're working for us and not the other way around.
Okay, and this you basically addressed just one. You want to make one last point in this.
Toilets and infrastructure. Let me just say, if anybody here lives in the city, I'm just going to put up my email. And if there's specific issues that I can help with, I have an office that deals with pniot tzibur, as we say, or public complaints. And I'd be more than happy to receive an email and to deal with your local issues.
Okay, so this is one last question, which again, you basically addressed, but if somebody wants to know how a political solution between Israel and the Palestinians would affect the Arab residents of Yerushalayim and in terms of the becoming more integrated, etc., how that would affect that.
Well, look, I think we're very, very long way away from a political solution with the Palestinians, mainly because the Palestinians, who are the Palestinians? They're split into three within the Fatah, and then they've got Hamas, and then you've got Islamic Jihad. Who's gonna deliver peace? Who are you gonna sit with? They need to get their own house in order before they even start talking to us. They need to stop incitement in the school books before they even start talking to us. So that's going to take a while. But again, I want to go back to the peace to prosperity philosophy that when the plan was announced by the Trump administration and Jerusalem, most of Jerusalem kind of stayed within Israeli sovereignty, the people who breathed the biggest sigh of relief were the Arabs from East Jerusalem. And so all I can say is that if they have the choice and they're allowed to vote freely according to what they want, I know what side they're going to pick to be on.
Okay, we want to thank you. We really appreciate your tremendous insight. Also, it really is impressive, I have to say, just that you put yourself out there in terms of your email. You can just call you. There was an article about you recently in Jerusalem that discussed that, how accessible that you really are. So you really are a tremendous role model, I think, for other politicians.
I'm trying to emulate the whole, like, reach your congressperson model.
Right, so there's
no regions in Israel. And so this is the only thing people have. And so the English speakers are very naturally come to me, and they are a very strong part of my constituency. So I'm always here to serve everybody with any problem that they might have. That's my job.
Yeah, our first guest 2 weeks ago, Michal Kotter-Wunsch, also discussed that, and that's really part of her persona as well. So Ken Yerbu, there should be more and more politicians like you, more and more women, and
Amen.
like you described, that hopefully, and that you should continue to have great success, that you really should see the success of all of Yerushalayim, like you described, and we have tremendous amount of nachas of somebody living in Yerushalayim from you, and all this great success to you. On behalf of Kedma, again, and JIC Israel, we want to thank you again for all your time, and we look forward to working together in the future to create a wonderful Yerushalayim. So,
amen. I want to shout out to Jody Samuels, who's a friend and neighbor. Thank you for being a co-sponsor, and thank you for inviting me, Maury. Thank you so much.
Okay, all the best. Take care. Thank you, and thank you, Orit, again for your help.